couple of videos ago, I spoke about the importance of visual character design. It's something I feel rather strongly about, given I'm a huge fan of art and animation. A bad character design can at best be wasted potential, and at worst can completely put off any and all audiences from consuming your product, just as we saw with the Cats movie. Character design plays a large role in how we interpret characters in visual media, and I feel it's something we don't appreciate enough, especially when nowadays it can play a huge role in a movie's reception. So, since I'm always doing my best to try to educate, today it's time to go over the top 10 biggest pitfalls when it comes to character design. Now, before we get started, I will point out that art styles are incredibly subjective, and sometimes strange art styles can make otherwise bad character designs endearing. And once again, a good character design doesn't necessarily have to be a beautiful character design. Also, before we start, in order to keep this, shall we say, family friendly, there is one pretty big pitfall I won't be covering here in this video, and that's unintentionally Freudian character design. I think you know what I'm talking about, and I don't think I need to explain that. I also won't be discussing racial caricatures. Again, you should probably know why that's bad already. But anyway, let's get started. Number 10, the unnecessary redesign. So this one is at the bottom as it is a little vague, but it still needs to be discussed. Sometimes a character design can be absolutely fine, but someone, for some reason, decides it needs a reboot of sorts. Now, don't get me wrong, sometimes redesigns can be fine and can be even better looking than the original. But other times, they can range from entirely unnecessary to completely going against the original design's appeal, to just being downright ugly. Like, if your character design is a bit outdated and just needs a bit of an update, fair enough. But if you're gonna abandon everything that made the original what it was, well, why don't you just create a new character instead? Number 9. Overly thin body parts. Do you ever look at certain characters and think, how exactly is this person standing upright? This is a problem caused by making your character's limbs and bodies overly skinny to the point where it's kind of distracting. While overly thin legs and torsos are bad enough, for me, the worst case has to be overly thin necks. Like, how are these characters able to keep their own heads up? This is something that is forgivable if you have very stylized animation, but quite often it ends up looking strange and unnatural, especially if you have a more detailed or realistic art style. Generally, some of the worst kinds of character design are those that make the character's existence look physically painful. Number 8. Same face syndrome. One thing that is important when it comes to character design is giving every character their own unique look. A look that differentiates the characters, making them easy to tell apart and easy to understand. This becomes a lot harder when you succumb to same face syndrome, wherein the characters' faces are more or less exactly the same, bar a few minute details. Now, while this isn't so bad if you have a super minimalist style, since a small detail change can mean a lot when the characters don't have many details to begin with, it can be very much a problem if your designs are realistic and detailed. It looks lazy, it's a boring design that wastes creative potential, and it makes your characters look cookie cutter and homogeneous. It's often a problem that comes with constantly trying to make characters look as clean and pretty as possible, and like I said at the beginning, an ugly design isn't necessarily a bad design, and a pretty design isn't necessarily a good design. When all your pretty characters look the same, it just comes across as lazy, uncreative, and plastic. Number 7. Horrible textures. This is something that mostly just applies to CGI, but it is definitely worth mentioning. Basically, when it comes to designing a 3D CGI character, you have to stop and consider the textures of their skin, hair, fur, scales, whatever. And if you can't afford to perfect such textures, things can go wrong. In some cases, they can look slimy, in other cases, they can look plastic, and in many cases, they just flat out don't look real. Even something as simple as making them look too pristine and shiny just ends up looking distractingly unrealistic. But at least unrealistic is better than looking downright gooey and hideous, or like they're flat out made of rubber. Number 6, the Overdesigned. I'm not going to pretend that the Transformers aren't amazing feats of CGI, but at the same time, what am I looking at here? There is so much detail in these characters that it's actually hard to keep track of their movements. You might think, oh, well, if I'm properly designing this character, I need to put in a lot of effort and detail into it, right? Well, no, sometimes less is more, and sometimes when a character is so incredibly detailed, trying to focus on them is actually difficult because every little inch is so distracting. And ironically, despite the thought process being that a lot of detail will make a character stand out and be remembered, the fact that you have to concentrate so hard to take in every inch of their design actually makes them less memorable as a result. Number 5, ridiculous, impossible outfits. While a character's physical features are important, their chosen items of clothing also play a key role in their appearance. And this can cause some problems if their clothing looks utterly ridiculous. This can range from ridiculously over-the-top armour that would clearly be more of a hindrance than a help given how difficult it'd be to move in, to, of course, a significant lack of armour on a character who's meant to be a warrior. Why are your vital organs exposed? How are your breasts not bursting out from that outfit? What is the purpose of those thigh-high boots? I'm not saying you can't get creative with outfits, and obviously ridiculous outfits are fine if the media in question is already ridiculous in tone, but if you are trying to create a serious piece of work, once again, sometimes less is more, but other times, no, please add more. Number 4, super sexual dimorphism. So obviously, sexual dimorphism is a thing that exists in the real world, like how male lions have manes, or how peacocks have huge flashy tails. But in the world of animation, it seems all anthropomorphic animals have blatant, ridiculous sexual dimorphism, such as having long human hair, even if they aren't mammals, males having buff, human-like physiques, and, of course, any female character, regardless of species, having breasts, including non-mammals like birds and reptiles. Making a design a little bit more masculine or feminine is fine and all, but making it this blatant to the point of complete and utter biological inaccuracy is just lazy. It's easily possible to separate your male and female character designs without giving them breasts or human hairdos. Number 3, the Overly Grotesque. While an ugly character is fine, and in many cases can be well designed, there is a case of going too far with it. When a character is so incredibly over-the-top grotesque, chances are it's just going to be difficult to watch. Even the most hideous characters need at least a little bit of ugly charm to them. If they're just flat-out repulsive to look at, then no one is going to want to watch them. The truth is, you do need a lot of talent to make a hideous art style look endearing. It's absolutely possible, but you do need to put a lot of effort into it. If you're just going to be lazy about it and pander to the gross out crowd, chances are it's just going to be too much to bear. Number 2, creepy eyes. It's time to talk about the uncanny valley again. For those of you who didn't see my previous video on character design and don't know what I'm talking about, the uncanny valley is a term used to describe depictions of people that look too realistic but not realistic enough at the same time, causing discomfort. And one of the biggest causes of the uncanny valley effect is badly designed eyes. Eyes are one of the things that make us recognisably human. The life and intelligence in our eyes are one of the main factors of our human appearances. So when creating an image of a human, it's one of the biggest pitfalls that send you hurtling down into the uncanny valley. If your character design is simplistic, making their eyes overly detailed can turn them creepy. If your character design is realistic, making their eyes too large and wide or too small and beady can also be creepy as hell. And furthermore, if you are going for a realistic character design, sometimes just not adding enough life and spark to the eyes is enough to make the character simply look like a moving corpse. Which brings me to my final point. Number 1, unnecessary realism. It's one thing to have ugly, unpleasant character designs, but it's another to have character designs so bad that they pretty much destroy any chance of the media's success. It happened to Mars Needs Moms, it happened to Cats, and it very nearly happened to Sonic the Hedgehog movie. And what do all these things have in common? A desperate attempt to make the characters look as realistic as possible, thus horribly triggering the uncanny valley effect. Even though it never came to be, perhaps original Sonic the Hedgehog is the perfect example of this. The original design, with its creepy small eyes and human-looking hands and teeth, is just horrible to look at, because it's abandoning the charm of Sonic's cartoonish design in favour of quote-unquote realism. The redesign, on the other hand, incredibly pleasant and quite cute to look at, because it actually takes advantage of the cartoonish proportions. The desperation for realism comes from the rejection of cartoonish designs that supposedly look too childish, in order to appeal to older audiences. But you know what? Screw that. Cartoons can look amazing. Cartoons can look beautiful. There's nothing wrong with aiming for a pretty, cartoonish design. At the very least, they certainly look better than freaky, uncanny valley mocap nightmares that desperately try to aim for realism, despite the visuals just flat out not being able to support it. And if you don't believe me, well, those numbers don't lie. Thanks for watching the video. What are your favourite and least favourite character designs or art styles, and why do you love or hate them? Are there any other character design faults you think I should have mentioned here? Whatever your thoughts, let me know down below. Like, share and subscribe and all that jazz, and I hope to see you again next time. Goodbye!